I don't know about you guys, but I can't stop watching the new Robert Pattinson Batman trailer.
The hell are you supposed to be? I'm vengeance. Whoa! This guy's crazy!
I mean, it's like so dope. It gets me so hyped like every single time I watch it, and I kind of can't stop thinking about it. Like, I've even started watching reaction videos on YouTube to it just so I have an excuse to actually watch the trailer again. And that kind of got me thinking, why am I so obsessed with this trailer and really Batman in general? I mean, Batman is my favorite fictional character in any piece of media ever, probably. Recently, I just finished a playthrough of Batman Arkham Asylum on the channel, and it was pretty amazing, if I'm being honest. I've always known that this game had a major influence on how I view Batman, but it became really apparent on this most recent playthrough, and especially when that new trailer dropped. Batman Arkham Asylum released on August 25th in 2009, which just so happens to be when a 7-year-old me was really getting into video games. I mean, I can remember at the time playing games like Halo 3, Modern Warfare 2, Left 4 Dead, things like that. And while I loved those games, and still do, something was kind of different with Batman Arkham Asylum. At the time, I remember that I liked Batman, but Spider-Man and Iron Man were really the two frontrunners when it comes to superheroes, as the only piece of Batman media that I watched at the time was like maybe the animated show and The Dark Knight. And those are amazing. In fact, The Dark Knight is probably my favorite movie of all time, but I wouldn't come to understand or really appreciate them until a few years later. But with Arkham Asylum, something was different. I think the main thing about it was that I could actually do it, The gameplay made me... Listen, guys, I know that this is like the most cliche and cheesy thing you can say when talking about these games, but it's true. It makes you feel like Batman. This game was not only revolutionary to how I view video games, but revolutionary to the entire games industry itself. Oh yeah, and by the way, in this video, I'm kind of just going to be breaking down the gameplay and story and stuff, just really going through the whole game, so buckle up. Alright, so the gameplay in really all the Arkham games can be broken up into 3 parts. 1, navigation, 2, combat, and 3, stealth. And I'm probably just going to start off with navigation, because I kind of have the least to say about it. I mean, while the navigation in this game isn't as impressive mechanically as we would come to see in the sequels, there's something about this game that really stands out from the rest. Walking down the halls of Arkham Asylum gives me a feeling that has never been replicated before. The environment and ambiance of this game is easily the best in the series, and I think it fits in with navigation, as no matter where you go, you're never really away from the uneasy, eerie type of feeling that the asylum gives you. And whether you are going through intensive treatment or the Botanical Gardens or Arkham Mansion, the claustrophobic and unsettling feeling of being trapped in an insane asylum never really goes away. The setting and tone of this game is a major contributor to why navigation is so great, as mechanically, the actual navigation is not complicated and pretty bare bones, but Rocksteady is able to use the environment to immerse you in the world that gives off a feeling like no other. So, the combat system is definitely the most revolutionary and influential thing that came out of this game. I mean, it's kind of like what the Arkham series is really known for, is their combat. So basically, the combat system is known as a free-flow combat system. It's a very simple system at its core, but through progression of the game, becomes a much deeper system, and I think a much more fun system at that. The simple explanation of it is that there is a button to strike and a button to counter enemy strikes. Later on, you will learn new ways to take care of enemies that are introduced through a new type of enemy. Such as like a stun baton guy, you have to like take care of him a certain way, as well as a dude with daggers. But the thing about it is that those moves that you learn to take them out can be applied to every other enemy, except for like the Titan ones. Along with that, as you level up, you can unlock more abilities that expand your arsenal, whether it's an actual takedown or a gadget upgrade. The progression system actually allows the combat to expand as well as the way you approach any situation. This allows for a much more replayable and engaging experience for the player. The only negative thing I can really say about it is that as you master the combat, it can become pretty easy, but surprisingly, it never really gets boring. I mean, the satisfaction that you get from clearing out a room without taking a single hit and building up to a times 100 combo by doing everything so perfectly, countering when you need to counter, striking when you need to strike, and using a variety of moves to clear the room is a feeling that is never matched in any other combat system. And you don't really feel it except for in the actual Arkham games. All of them are really excellent in this game, and in this one, even back then in 2009, they kind of nailed it. This type of system would obviously be later taken and implemented into other games such as like the Shadow of Mordor series, which is pretty fun, and then Spider-Man PS4. Stealth is the final branch of gameplay regarding the Arkham games that I really want to talk about. So when I first played through these, way back in the day, I had always favored the combat sequences over the stealth sequences, mainly because I was better at the combat and thus they were more fun to me when I was younger. While the stealth in these games isn't too difficult, it definitely took me longer to actually master. And while the combat does have a variety of moves and takedowns that expands the gameplay, I would argue that the stealth has infinitely more variety, and since growing out of the phase where I just suck at video games when I was like 10, stealth has actually become my favorite part of all of the Arkham games, at least gameplay-wise it has. While the combat is fun and very replayable, I think that the stealth has so much more potential. And even though both of these systems wouldn't reach their peaks until later games, it's still very apparent to me how much potential is actually in the stealth compared to the combat, even in the most bare bones game of them all, Arkham Asylum. And while I think that most people, including myself, tend to go for easier strategies when clearing out a room, as in wait for one goon to be alone, then perform a silent takedown, rinse and repeat. The amount of actual variety that is accessible to the player is immensely larger compared to the combat. And while a lot of the gadgets are used for navigation and some are used for combat, stealth is where they shine. Almost every gadget can be used in a way that either helps you out when clearing a room or just kind of shakes things up a bit and makes things more exciting. My favorites are the Bat Claw that you can use to pull an enemy over a ledge and then it knocks them out, and the Sonic Battering that can attract an enemy to its location, making it easier to drop down and perform a silent takedown real quick, or whenever you upgrade it, it can actually explode right there and knock them out. I also really like that whenever you achieve or really obtain the inverted takedown, you can hang a goon by its feet from a gargoyle, and then when another goon walks up and is kind of looking at him, you can cut him down and it'll scare him. And it's kind of just like a nice little detail that really adds to the immersion of the game, and I really like it. With the stealth being as expansive as it is one of the big reasons why going through these games never really gets dull for me. Alright, so last I want to talk about the story and the bosses, and I definitely have the most to say about this part of the game. So the game starts off with Batman bringing in Joker, and the Joker supposedly gave up without a fight, which obviously isn't normal. So Batman's kind of like worried about it. He's like, oh yeah, this is normal Gordon, blah blah blah. Joker then proceeds to take over the entire asylum, and it forces Batman to stay on the island and, take him down. First off, I think this is a brilliant start to a Batman story. I mean, come on, trapping Batman on an insane asylum, which is on an island isolated from the rest of the city, by the way, with every supervillain he's ever thrown into here kind of released onto him at once. I mean, it's a fantastic premise. The rest of the story follows Batman making his way through the island to get to Joker. Along the way, you discover new areas, situations, enemy types, and bosses. So, the boss fights in this game are definitely underwhelming for sure. And later I'm going to get into why that is done, but I want to talk about the first couple bosses because I think they're really well done. So the first actual boss fight I think is just amazing and kind of a great opener to the rest of the game. So the first actual boss is an encounter with Scarecrow that takes place in a morgue, where he injects you with some fear toxin and then takes you into a hellish nightmare world. You are then introduced to Scarecrow himself, except he's giant and rotating around the arena and just really looking for you, and by the way, he can kill you in one hit. So you then have to sneak your way to a spotlight that you can shine on him, and then it like ends the encounter. This sequence is really cool and is the first of 3 encounters with him, and he'll pop up like as you progress throughout the game. And I think it's like really well done. It's just like you get thrown into there and it's just like immediately like, whoa, this looks crazy. And it's kind of a perfect representation of what I think Scarecrow puts Batman into. You know, like we see a lot of this, you see some of it in Batman Begins, and I think it's well done in there. But in this game, being able to actually implement gameplay into it, they really use it really well, I think. The only bad thing I can say about it is that it's pretty easy, if I'm being honest. But I think it gets a pass because it's the very first one. It doesn't have to be too difficult. Next is Bane. So this is like the first traditional boss fight that I can remember in my life. You know, back then it was pretty challenging for me, you know, and to this day it's still fun. You know, I love playing through it, and it genuinely is a highlight of the game for me. The only thing is that playing it years later is kind of a breeze. And I think it can get a pass, however, because while it's technically the second boss of the game, it still occurs very early on in the game, and it's played in a completely different style than the Scarecrow one, as in this is a combat boss rather than a stealth one. Unfortunately, the bosses in this game don't really get too much more difficult, and this is the single biggest problem with this game. The bosses aren't really engaging because beyond your first playthrough or a return after 5 or more years, the bosses are overall very easy and pretty disappointing. The stealth encounters, Scarecrow and Killer Croc, however, are the exceptions. While gameplay-wise they are very repetitive and can overall be pretty easy, they do a really good job of immersing you into those certain environments that they don't really need to be as complex or difficult, because they aren't actually relying on the gameplay like the others. The only combat boss that I genuinely enjoy is Poison Ivy, and even then it feels like it's kind of cut short by only having 2 phases instead of 3. So I think overall I can get over the bosses because the rest of the game is like genuinely amazing. But there is one boss that is so horrendously bad that if I had to actually put a grade on this system or on this game, I would have to take points off of it because of this boss. The reason I say that is because it's the final boss. The final boss fight in a video game needs to be challenging and engaging. It needs to be a culmination of the rest of the game leading up to it. I mean, don't get me wrong, the final boss fight doesn't have to be the best one or even the most difficult one in the game. But when it is as bad as this one, you can kind of understand why it's so frustrating. So a lot of the hate goes to the fact that Joker can't really hold a candle to Batman when it comes to hand-to-hand combat. And people hate the fact that in this game, he just becomes a hulking beast with like bones sticking out of him and stuff like that, in order to be able to compete with Batman. While I agree with this, you know, I don't really think Joker should be handled, you know, with a combat encounter. I'm fine with them trying to even the odds between the two and switch things up, as long as the gameplay can justify the decision. As long as the boss fight is fun, I can get over it, honestly. But that's the thing. This boss fight sucks. It is so easy, boring, and not engaging at all. In this boss, Joker chases you around the arena, swiping at you, you know, basically just trying to hit you with his huge nails. And if you get hit, it can actually do a decent amount of damage to you. However, the holy secret, the Konami code to this boss fight is run in a circle. Seriously, that's it. You just run in a circle and then he'll jump onto his podium thing and you're done with the entire first phase of the boss fight, basically. I mean, Come on. And you may be thinking, oh yeah, well that's just the first part, you know, that's just the first thing. What happens in the rest of the boss fight? Well, buddy, the rest of the boss fight consists of you fighting a couple of enemies, ultra backclawing Joker down to the arena to you, punching him a couple times, and you do that 2 more times. I think the main thing that I hate about this boss fight is that it's the final one. It's the last thing you experience before the game sends you back to the title screen. And for me, it leaves a really bad taste in my mouth. While this boss fight sucks, however, I don't think it takes too much away from the overall game. I mean, if I had to rate it, I would definitely take points off of it for it, but it doesn't ruin any part of the game and never causes any hesitation as to if I want to play this game or not. This game was overall revolutionary to the rest of the gaming industry and opened up so many possibilities, specifically with superhero games. I mean, before this, you kind of had like Spider-Man 2. That's kind of it, you know? Superhero games were like a joke before this. I will always appreciate this game as it hit me at the perfect time in my life. Being able to actually be Batman is something that has influenced so much of me, and even to this day, I'm still playing it. This game is very near and dear to my heart, and I'm willing to say that I wouldn't be the same person I am today without this game, because Batman is such a big part of me, and this game is a very big reason for that. In fact, I'm willing to say with confidence that Batman Arkham Asylum is the single most influential piece of Batman media to me personally ever.